This Bayan man is proclaiming victory. A traditional ceremony, this prideful performance usually occurs after a battle is won. But in this instance, it's a part of the opening ceremonies of the 2017 International Austronesian Conference. The gathering brings together indigenous people from Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as one Abenaki from the Odanak First Nation in Quebec.
As I've gone around the world over these past 15 years, meeting with other indigenous peoples in various situations, what is astounding is the similarity of our experiences.
I also want to acknowledge that I am on indigenous territory.
As CEO of APTN, Jean LaRose was invited here to speak on a media panel. One issue raised that struck a chord with him: the race to save Taiwan's indigenous languages from extinction.
While they haven't had a residential school experience per se, they have been integrated and forced into a mainstream education system that is not at all friendly to their languages. And most of them have communities that have as few language speakers as we do in Canada.
Taiwan has a population of about 23 million and growing, on an island smaller than Nova Scotia. The 16 recognized indigenous tribes make up 2.3% of the population, about 530,000 people. The risk of being assimilated into larger Chinese culture is very real.
The longer we wait to really save our language, the more people move to urban area, the more indigenous peoples are connected with modernity. They, of course, during this course of time, they change. And I think the challenge is, how do we hold on to what we used to be, the tradition, the language.
Yera Palama is the CEO of the foundation that runs Taiwan Indigenous Television, known as TITV. Since 2005, they've been producing news and award-winning programming in indigenous languages, and recently launched a radio station. While Palama is clearly proud of their work, she says it's getting harder to staff her programs with language speakers.
How do we maintain our identity as an ethnic media if we do not know enough about ourselves?
There appears to be some help on the way. Itchian Palush is the Minister of the Council of Indigenous Peoples, the arm of the government that deals with indigenous issues. Palush, who is a part of the Amis tribe, says that a recently passed law will promote indigenous languages.
We have been dedicating to the promoting of this bill of the indigenous language development for 12 years, and it was finally passed in the legislature this year. And it is very important that in this bill, the indigenous languages are confirmed to be the national languages of Taiwan.
The act will ask townships with significant indigenous populations to write all official documentation in their language, as well as Chinese, including road signs. The government also stepped up to help fund language centers like this one. These children are singing in the Piniu Mayan language. While this is certainly encouraging, it might not be enough. People here say the language could be extinct in 20 to 30 years. Tohima Tugal is a Piniu Mayan journalist and activist. She says the government needs to cut red tape that gets in the way of language development. One example she gives, her community of Kasavakan would like a traditional daycare where elders take care of kids and speak the language to them. But they can't, because the elders need childcare licenses to work at a daycare.
Either lose the regulation or try to find a way so our elders, our own people, can take care of our own children, and to have this environment for them to talk our languages on a daily life basis.
Togal also says government regulations interfere with other cultural practices, like hunting.
In the law, they say the indigenous peoples are allowed to hunt only for ceremonies, only for certain occasions. So we have to apply for it. So before we go hunting, we'll have to fill up an application and tell them, okay, how many deers we will get, how many pigs we will get, but who knows? Because it's not something that we will go for like, okay, 5 deers, then 5 deers. It's something given by our ancestors.
Regulations aside, the Piniu Mayan community of Kasavakan is doing its best to take language and culture preservation into its own hands. Hereditary chief Hakudu Malades picked up carving at the age of 48 in order to promote culture. Now his carvings depicting everyday Piniu Mayan life and legends decorate the village.
当然，我们身为一个原住民，当然也要找回我们自己，祖灵的这个尊严。我希望大家能够守住自己的文化，永远的去追视我们的祖先，让我们的子子孙孙。
With language revitalization and youth taking back traditional hunting practices, it would appear that many here want to follow their ancestors.
What really struck me here, as is striking us in Canada now, is the encouragement and the positive sense that a lot of young people have that it can be recaptured.
The Bayan ceremony is calling the animals to the guns of the men. In essence, they're asking for a bountiful hunt. But back then, instead of asking for permits from the government, they were requesting guidance from their ancestors. Now more than ever, it would appear that the indigenous peoples of Formosa will continue to take that approach. Tom Fennario, APTN National News, Taiwan.